4 generations, the elders of Ilemora repeated the same words in low, careful voices. The river only takes what the village refuses to protect. The children laughed when they heard it, the young men rolled their eyes, and the elders themselves spoke it like a habit, not a warning. Until the night the River Naru proved it was never a saying. It was a promise. By dawn, for lives were gone, the river had turned bitter, and an entire village understood, too late, that some refusals are sacred, and some mistakes awaken things that do not forgive. This is not a story about love. It is not a story about beauty. It is a story about a test and a village that failed it. The River Naru had flowed beside Ilemora longer than any living soul could remember. It fed their farms when the rains were kind. It cooled their children when the sun was cruel. It carried fish, laughter, and whispered secrets far beyond where human feet could follow. To the villagers, the river was life. But to those who listened closely, truly listened, the river was also a witness. And witnesses remember. On the afternoon Zarahi arrived, the sky was heavy with heat, and the air hung thick, as though the land itself was holding its breath. No drums announced her coming. No messenger ran ahead of her footstep. She walked into Ilemora quietly, alone, with dust clinging lightly to her feet. Yet everyone noticed. She was not loud in beauty, nor did she dress to draw attention. Her wrapper was simple, tied neatly at her waist. Her hair fell freely down her back, dark and full, moving gently with each step she took. But there was something about the way she walked, unhurried, steady, unbothered by the eyes that followed her, that made people stop what they were doing. Traders paused mid-call. Women straightened where they sat. Even children fell silent as she passed. Zarahi did not smile at the attention. She did not lower her gaze either. She walked as though she belonged neither to the village nor to the world's expectations of her. At the center of the market, seated beneath the shade of an old almond tree, was Mama Ola. Mama Ola had lived long enough to bury friends, rivals, and even enemies. Her back was bent with age, her skin mapped with years of sun and rain, and her eyes, though clouded, still saw more than most. When Zarahi stopped before her, Mama Ola felt a sudden tightening in her chest, the way one does when an old memory stirs without warning. "Good afternoon, Mama," Zarahi said, her voice calm and respectful. "Please, is there any place I might stay?" Mama Ola studied her in silence. The old woman had seen beauty before. She had seen beautiful women bring joy, jealousy, pride, and destruction. But this was different. Zarahi's presence carried a weight that could not be named easily, like the stillness before a storm or the quiet just before dawn breaks. "There is an empty hut," Mama Ola said at last, pointing slowly with her walking stick. "Near the palm grove, not far from the river." Zarahi inclined her head. "Thank you, Mama." She turned and walked away, leaving behind murmurs that rippled through the market like disturbed water. Mama Ola watched her go, unease settling deep in her bones. She could not say why, only that something old had shifted within her. Something long buried had stirred. Zarahi found the hut exactly as Mama Ola had described, small, abandoned, half swallowed by creeping vines and dust. She cleaned it herself, moving with quiet efficiency. By the time the sun dipped low and painted the sky in red and gold, she had settled in, lighting a small lamp as evening crept across Ilemora. That was when the village truly began to notice her. The next morning, men found reasons to pass by the palm grove. At first, it was harmless enough. Bam-eyed, a farmer with strong hands and a confident smile, brought yams he claimed he could not finish alone. Zarahi thanked him and declined politely. Later came Saneo, his words smooth, promising protection and comfort. She refused him as well, her tone neither cold nor inviting. By the third day, the visits increased. Men waited along paths she walked. They lingered near the stream when she fetched water. Some spoke kindly. Others spoke boldly. A few spoke as though her acceptance was already decided. Zarahi turned them all away. "I do not want a man," she said simply when pressed. I wish to be alone. Her refusal was calm. Final. Without apology. That was what unsettled them most. In Ilemora, refusal was expected to come with explanation. A woman might say she was promised, or waiting, or fearful, but Zarahi gave no reason at all. And to the village, silence was more dangerous than defiance. Whispers began. Does she think herself better than us? A woman without a man brings trouble. No one refuses every offer unless she is hiding something. By the end of the week, even Prince Kolwa, known for his charm and quiet authority, sought her out beneath the shade of a fig tree. Mirima, a village girl who had admired the prince since childhood, watched from a distance, her heart pounding with hope. You are beautiful, the prince said, his voice gentle but sure. Zarahi met his gaze without flinching. I know, she replied calmly. And still, my answer is no. Mirima felt something crack inside her. When Zarahi walked away, the village exhaled as one, but not in relief. Something had shifted. Respect had begun to rot into resentment. They gave her a name, Zarahi the Untouched. At first, it was spoken with curiosity. Later, with bitterness. In Ilemora, curiosity never stayed innocent for long. After Prince Kolwa's rejection became village knowledge, the tone shifted. Where people had once watched Zarahi with wonder, they now watched her with narrowed eyes. Conversations stopped when she passed. Laughter died suddenly in the market. Even children, quick to sense danger where adults pretended none existed, whispered her name like a warning. A woman who refuses a prince, they said, is either foolish or cursed. Zarahi noticed, of course. She noticed the way greetings became shorter, the way women drew their wrappers tighter around themselves when she approached, as though beauty were something contagious. But she did not respond. She did not change her routines or soften her stance. Each morning, she walked to the stream. Each evening, she returned to her hut by the palm grove. Her life remained simple, unyielding. It was Mirima who came to her first. She arrived one afternoon carrying an empty calabash, her smile warm, her eyes bright with practiced friendliness. You must be tired of being alone, Mirima said lightly. Fetching water by yourself every day is not easy. Zarahi regarded her for a moment before answering. I manage. Mirima laughed softly. Still, it is good to have company. My name is Mirima. Zarahi, she replied. And so it began. They walked together to the stream. They sat side by side peeling fruit in the evenings. Mirima talked, about village life, about old stories, about Prince Kolwa's kindness, about how lonely a woman could become without family nearby. Zarahi listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, her words were few and carefully chosen. To those watching from afar, the friendship appeared genuine. Mirima, the kind village girl. Zarahi, the quiet newcomer. It softened the village's suspicion slightly. But Mirima's kindness was not without hunger. Each day she studied Zarahi closely. She watched how she moved, how she bathed at the river's edge, how she slept, how she laughed at small things. She searched for cracks, for fear, for shame, for anything that might explain the refusal that had humiliated men and bruised egos. She found nothing. Zarahi woke before dawn and slept peacefully at night. She sang softly to herself while washing clothes. She showed no signs of witchcraft, no hidden deformity, no secret lover. There was no nervousness in her eyes, no bitterness in her laughter. And that made Mirima's resentment grow sharp and poisonous. If Zarahi was not broken, not cursed, not hiding shame, then her refusal was a choice. And that was unforgivable. One evening, as they sat near the river watching the sun melt into the water, Mirima finally asked what burned in her chest. Why do you refuse them all? She asked, pretending carelessness. Even the prince? Zarahi did not answer immediately. She watched the river instead, its surface catching the last light of day. Because I choose to, she said at last. Mirima frowned. But women must choose wisely. Being alone is dangerous. Zarahi turned to her then, her gaze steady. So is belonging to those who do not see you as human. The word struck Marima like a slap. She laughed, forced and brittle. You speak like someone who thinks herself above us. Zarahi shook her head slowly. I think myself equal. That night, Marima did not sleep. In other corners of Ilemora, anger gathered like storm clouds. Bamide, Seneo, and Kuranmi met often beneath the old mango tree, their voices low and bitter. She walks as if she owns the land, Bamide spat. She makes fools of us, Seneo added. A woman should know her place. Kuranmi said nothing at first, his jaw clenched tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. She needs to be humbled. They fell silent as footsteps approached. Marima stepped into the circle. The men stiffened. They knew she spent time with Zarahi. They expected her defense. I know what you're thinking, Marima said quietly. And I agree. Their surprise was immediate. She shames us all, she continued, her voice steady now. She believes herself untouchable because she refuses us. But no one should be allowed to stand above the village. What are you saying? Bamide asked cautiously. Marima leaned closer, lowering her voice. I can help you. I know her habits. I know when she is alone. The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. You would betray your own friend? Kuranmi asked. Marima's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. She was never my friend. The village's mood darkened swiftly after that. Women warned their daughters not to walk alone. Men watched Zarahi openly now, no longer hiding their hostility. Even Mama Ola noticed the change, the way the air itself seemed uneasy. One evening, as Zarahi passed through the market, Mama Ola caught her arm gently. Child, the old woman whispered, her voice trembling. This village is turning against you. Zarahi met her gaze, something unreadable in her eyes. I know, Mama. Then leave, Mama Ola urged. Nothing good comes from stirring old waters. Zarahi smiled sadly. Some waters must be stirred. Mama Ola felt a chill creep up her spine. The plan was set on a night when the moon hid behind clouds and the village settled into uneasy sleep. Marima approached Zarahi's hut with a calabash cradled carefully in her hands. Inside was a sweet drink, laced with something that dulled the senses and loosened the body's strength. She hesitated outside the door, her heart pounding. For a moment she considered turning back. Then she remembered the prince's dismissive wave. The whispers. The way Zarahi stood unbroken. She knocked. My friend, Marima called softly. I made something for you. Inside the hut, Zarahi sat in the dim lamplight, her shadow long against the wall. And as Marima stepped forward, the river nearby stirred unseen. Marima's hand trembled as she lifted it to knock. Inside the calabash she carried was a drink sweetened with honey and fruit, its scent warm and inviting. Beneath that sweetness hid something bitter, ground leaves and sap known only to a few women in the village. It would not kill. It would only silence the body long enough for others to do what they wished. She knocked again, softly. The door opened almost immediately. Zarahi stood before her, the lamplight behind her casting a soft glow around her form. Her eyes moved from Marima's face to the calabash, lingering there longer than comfort allowed. You came late, Zarahi said. Marima swallowed. I couldn't sleep, she replied quickly. I was testing a new drink. I thought you might help me decide if it's good. For a brief moment, the air between them felt heavy, stretched thin like a rope about to snap. Zarahi said nothing. Then she stepped aside. Come in. Marima released the breath she did not know she had been holding. Inside the hut, the lamp flickered gently. The walls seemed to listen. They sat on the floor facing each other. Marima poured the drink into a small wooden cup and held it out with a smile she practiced hard to keep steady. Zarahi took the cup. Her fingers brushed Marima's as she did, cool and calm. She lifted the drink to her lips, paused, and closed her eyes briefly, as though listening to something far away. Outside, unseen by human eyes, the River Naru shifted. Its waters rippled without wind. Zarahi drank. Slowly. Deliberately. Mirima watched her every swallow, her heart racing. When the cup emptied, Zarahi set it down carefully. "Well?" Mirima asked, forcing cheer into her voice. "What do you think?" Zarahi looked at her for a long moment. "I think," she said softly, "that you should have chosen differently." The world tilted. Her body swayed, her hand reaching out instinctively for balance before her knees gave way. She collapsed onto the earthen floor, her breath shallow, her eyes fluttering shut. Mirima stared. Then she smiled. She stepped outside and gave a short whistle, barely louder than the rustle of leaves. Shapes emerged from the darkness. Bam-eyed, Saneo and Kuranmi, their faces tight with anticipation and malice. "She's asleep," Mirima whispered. "Do it quickly." They rushed inside. The hut seemed smaller suddenly, the shadows thicker. One of the men knelt beside Zarahi, his breath uneven. Another reached for her arm. And then, light exploded. It burst from Zarahi's body like the breaking of dawn, white and blinding, forcing the men to cry out and shield their eyes. The ground trembled. The lamp shattered, plunging the hut into brilliance brighter than fire. Outside, villagers gasped as the glow pierced the night sky, drawing them from their homes. People stumbled into the open, fear and confusion written across their faces. Inside the hut, the air roared like rushing water. When the light finally dimmed, the men dared to look again. Zarahi stood. Her skin shimmered as though layered with flowing water. Droplets clung to her without wetting, sliding across her form like living things. Her eyes glowed with a depth no mortal gaze could hold, ancient and endless. Mirima collapsed against the wall, her legs giving way beneath her. The men stumbled backward, terror freezing them in place. Zarahi said, "You have done it again," her voice echoing like sound carried through a riverbed. "You have repeated what should have been buried." No one moved. No one breathed. "I came to Ilemora not as a woman, but as a measure." Outside, villagers crowded around the hut, too afraid to enter, too afraid to flee. Mama Ola stood among them, her heart pounding, memories stirring violently in her mind. "A long time ago," Zarahi continued, "this village bore another woman. Her name was Lolani. She wished only to live quietly. She refused the hands that reached for her without consent. And for that, she was hated." Images pressed into the minds of those present. Lolani was molested and killed for choosing to be in isolation of everybody. Her body was then dragged into the river under the cover of night. "The culprits were the ancestors of these three men," Zarahi said, turning her gaze toward them, "and one woman who opened the door." Mirima sobbed. "They believed the river would erase their crime," Zarahi continued. "But the river does not forget." Outside, a murmur of horror rippled through the villagers. "The Mother of Waters, Ilenra, heard Lolani's cries," she said. "But destruction is never the first answer. She chose to wait. She chose to test. I was sent as that test." Silence fell like a blade. "If the people of Ilemora had learned, I would have left quietly. But you..." She turned back to the four trembling figures. "You chose entitlement over humanity." The river outside surged, its waters rising unnaturally high, until the descendants of those who committed the first atrocity willingly returned to the river. Mirima shook her head violently. "No," she sobbed. "We didn't know." The hut shook once more, and then the light collapsed inward, vanishing as suddenly as it had come. Zarahi was gone. Only silence remained. And outside, the River Naru flowed on, waiting. "At first, hear this curse," she declared. "From this night onward, the land will reject you. Seeds will rot. Crops will wither. Illness will walk freely among you. The river will turn bitter to your tongues." Cries rose from outside. "This curse will not lift," she continued. The people of Ilemora hoped it had all been a nightmare. They woke the morning after the light with sore eyes and dry mouths, whispering prayers as though sound itself might anger the unseen. The hut by the palm grove stood exactly as it had before, except for the blackened scorch marks on its walls and the shattered lamp on the floor. There was no trace of Zarahi. No footprints. No sign she had ever been human at all. Some said it was mass fear. Others insisted it was witchcraft. A few claimed the men had exaggerated to save themselves from shame. By midday, the River Naru no longer tasted right. Women who dipped their calabashes into its flow spat the water out in disgust. It left bitterness on the tongue and dryness in the throat. By evening, fish floated lifeless on the surface, their silver bellies catching the dying light. Within days, the soil followed. Farmers who planted yams and maize watched the ground crack open beneath the sun. Seeds that had sprouted weeks earlier shriveled and died, as though poisoned by the earth itself. Leaves curled inward, yellowing before their time. Then sickness came. It crept quietly at first. Headaches that would not fade, fevers that returned no matter how many herbs were boiled. Children grew weak. The old struggled for breath. Healers shook their heads, their knowledge useless against a sickness that did not belong to the body alone. Fear thickened the air of Ilemora like smoke. The villagers whispered Zarahi's name now with regret rather than suspicion. Some wept openly. Others cursed the night they had watched in silence while hatred grew. Mama Ola said nothing at first. She sat outside her hut each evening, her eyes fixed on the river, memories clawing their way to the surface. Faces long forgotten rose in her mind. A girl who had once walked alone. A story she had been told as a child and instructed never to repeat. One night, as the moon hung low and pale, Mama Ola finally spoke. "The river has come to collect," she said softly. Word spread quickly. Elders gathered beneath the old mango tree, their faces drawn and hollow. They argued in hushed voices, searching desperately for another meaning, another escape. "We cannot sacrifice our own," one elder whispered. "The girl said willingly," another replied. "We cannot force them." "But they are young," a third protested. "Their ancestors committed the crime." Mama Ola lifted her trembling hand. "Evil does not die with time," she said. "It sleeps. And when it wakes, it looks for familiar blood." Silence followed. Meanwhile, Marima, Bam-eyed, Saneo, and Kuranmi lived as though hunted by something no one else could see. Sleep abandoned them entirely. When they closed their eyes, the river followed. They dreamed of water filling their lungs, of hands dragging them downward, of Lolani's face twisted in fear and betrayal. They woke screaming, soaked in sweat, their hearts pounding against their ribs. During the day, the village watched them with open hatred. Women pulled their children away when they passed. Men spat at their feet. No one spoke to them unless forced by necessity. Their huts became prisons filled with whispering shadows. Marima suffered worst of all. Each night she heard Zarahi's voice in her dreams, not angry, not cruel, only disappointed. "You chose," the voice said again and again. She tried to eat, but food turned to ash in her mouth. She tried to pray, but the words dissolved before leaving her lips. When she walked past the river, her legs shook so badly she had to sit. One afternoon, she collapsed near the water's edge, sobbing. "I didn't know," she whispered to the rushing current. "I didn't know." The river answered with silence. Desperation drove the villagers beyond Ilemora's borders. They carried empty bowls and cracked calabashes to neighboring villages, begging for food and clean water. But news of the curse traveled faster than hunger. Doors closed. "We will not anger the spirits," people said, refusing to help. Children returned home crying. Elders returned defeated. Under the mango tree, the final meeting was called. "We are dying," an elder said hoarsely. "If we do nothing, there will be no village left to save." Mama Ola looked toward the four figures standing apart from the crowd, their heads bowed, their bodies already broken by guilt. "The river asked for its debt," she said. "And the debt knows its owners." That night, as clouds gathered thick and heavy overhead, Marima made her decision. She did not scream or fight when the others came to her hut. She rose quietly, her eyes hollow but clear. I am ready, she said. Bamide, Saneo, and Kurami followed. At dawn, the entire village gathered at the banks of the River Naru. No drums sounded. No songs were sung. Only the low murmur of the river filled the air, swollen and restless. The four stood barefoot at the water's edge. Marima looked once at the village, at the children, the elders, Mama Ola, and bowed her head. We are sorry, she said, her voice barely carrying. We did not learn. The river surged forward, and the sky darkened. The rain fell until the earth could hold no more. When morning came, the River Naru flowed gently once again, clear and patient, as though nothing had happened. The footprints at its edge were gone. The water revealed no bodies, no bones, no sign of struggle, only silence. The people of Ilemora rebuilt their lives slowly, carefully, as one does after waking from a terrible dream that still clings to the skin. Crops returned. Children laughed again. The sick grew strong. On the surface, the village healed. But no one ever stood by the river without remembering. Years passed. Children grew into adults who had never known the curse, yet they were taught never to mock a woman's refusal, never to question her silence, never to believe that desire was the same thing as entitlement. And whenever a stranger asked why the people of Ilemora were so careful with their words, so gentle with their women, the elders would answer quietly, "Because we once failed a test." Mama Ola lived long enough to see grandchildren playing beside the river. On the day she died, the village gathered to bury her near the palm grove. As they lowered her body into the earth, the wind stirred the water softly, just once. Some swore they heard a voice in the flowing current, not loud, not angry, only calm. The kind of calm that comes after justice. From that day on, no woman in Ilemora ever needed to explain why she chose to walk alone. No man ever believed he was owed a body simply because he wanted it. And no one forgot that the river was watching. Because the river does not punish without reason. It only remembers. And when people forget who they are, when they forget who they hurt, when they forget that a woman's no is complete on its own, the river waits. This is why the elders say, a village is judged not by how it praises women, but by how it treats them when they refuse. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, if it made you uncomfortable in the way truth often does, like this story, subscribe to Nokara Stories. Because these are not just stories. They are warnings, they are memories, and some lessons must never be forgotten,